The first sound I heard was not the wind screaming against the mountain lodge or the heavy snow collapsing from the roof. It was the sharp crack of timber above us, followed by a violent tremor that shook dust from the ceiling and sent a framed photograph crashing between Maren Whitlock and me. For one terrifying second, I thought the entire building was coming down. Maren grabbed my arm, her fingers trembling despite the cold confidence she wore every day at the office, and stared at the blocked windows as pale daylight disappeared behind a wall of snow. We were trapped miles from the nearest town, the road had vanished beneath the storm, our phones had no signal, and the only person I had beside me was the woman who had spent 3 years trying to destroy my career. Before I tell you what happened inside that lodge, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances. Sometimes the person we judge most harshly is fighting a battle we were never brave enough to notice. My name is Callum Mercer, and until that morning, I believed I understood Maren perfectly. She was ambitious, polished, relentlessly prepared, and capable of turning every meeting into a contest. We worked for a Boston architecture firm that specialized in restoring historic buildings, and we had been competing for the same promotion since the day she arrived. When I presented a design, Maren found the weakness. When she proposed a budget, I questioned every number. Our co-workers joked that we could turn a conversation about door hinges into a courtroom trial. The truth was less amusing. I resented her because she seemed to receive everything I had fought years to earn: the managing director's attention, the most visible projects, and the kind of respect that made a room fall silent when she spoke. She resented me, or so I assumed, because I refused to step aside. Our rivalry had become so personal that neither of us remembered where professional competition ended and genuine hostility began. The mountain trip was supposed to decide everything. We had been sent to inspect an abandoned resort our firm hoped to restore, and whichever of us produced the stronger proposal would likely become senior project director. The morning had begun under a weak silver sky. The forecast predicted light snow, and the local caretaker had assured us the access road would remain open until late afternoon. By noon, however, the snowfall had thickened into a white curtain. The caretaker left early to check on his elderly wife in town, promising to return before the road became dangerous. He never made it back. Maren and I continued measuring rooms, photographing damaged beams, and arguing about whether the original stonework could be saved. Even as the windows widened and the wind grew louder, neither of us wanted to be the first to suggest leaving. Pride held us there longer than common sense. At one point, Maren glanced outside and quietly said the road was disappearing. I answered that she was free to leave if the project felt too difficult. Her face tightened, and she returned to her notes without another word. 20 minutes later, we discovered that our rental vehicle was buried nearly to its roof and a fallen pine had blocked the driveway. By the time we understood the seriousness of our situation, the storm had already sealed us inside. The lodge still had electricity from an old backup generator, but the heating system failed soon after the roof beam cracked. We found blankets, canned food, bottled water, and a small emergency radio in a maintenance cabinet. The radio signal faded in and out, carrying fragments of warnings about closed highways, downed power lines, and rescue crews overwhelmed across the county. The storm was expected to continue through the daylight hours and possibly into the following morning. Maren listened with her arms folded tightly across her chest. She tried to appear composed, but I noticed her breathing had become shallow. When another gust shook the building, she flinched and pressed one hand against the wall. I asked whether she was all right. She replied too quickly that she was fine. I almost made a sarcastic remark, but something in her expression stopped me. For the first time, the woman standing across from me did not look like my rival. She looked afraid that we moved into the lodge's old library, where a stone fireplace could provide warmth. The chimney was partially blocked, and clearing it required both of us to climb onto a maintenance platform beneath the upper flue. We worked in silence, passing tools and removing years of debris. Maren's hands shook as she held the ladder, and when I asked again whether something was wrong, she snapped that I should focus on the chimney. Her anger felt familiar, but the fear beneath it did not. Once the fire finally caught, orange light spread across the dusty room while pale afternoon brightness pressed against the snow-covered windows. We sat several feet apart, wrapped in separate blankets, eating crackers from an emergency tin. The silence between us felt heavier than the storm. Every complaint, every accusation, and every private resentment seemed to be sitting in the room with us. Maren broke the silence by asking why I hated her so much. The question startled me because it contained none of her usual sharpness. I told her I did not hate her, I simply did not trust her. I reminded her of the courthouse restoration proposal she had presented 2 years earlier using structural research I had gathered. She had received the praise, while my contribution had barely been mentioned. I spoke about the museum project she had taken over after telling management I was overextended. I admitted that every time she smiled after winning an argument, I saw someone who measured success by how completely she could defeat me. Maren listened without interrupting. When I finished, her eyes glistened, but she looked toward the fire before I could understand why. Then she said I had never once asked what had actually happened. Her explanation came slowly. The courthouse research had been submitted under both our names, but an executive assistant had removed mine from the presentation after assuming Maren had completed the final draft. Maren claimed she had corrected the mistake privately, only to be warned by a director that challenging the credit decision would make her appear ungrateful. The museum project had been assigned to her after our manager learned that I was caring for my father during his heart surgery. Maren had not told management I was incapable. She had asked them to reduce my workload so I would not lose my position while taking emergency leave. She had believed she was protecting me. I stared at her, stunned and suspicious, searching her face for manipulation. She reached into her leather document case and handed me a folded email printed months earlier. It showed that she had recommended me for the museum project's final presentation and had insisted my name remain on the completed design. The director had declined that. I felt something inside me begin to fracture. For years, I had built my anger from moments I understood only partially. Yet I was not ready to surrender every grievance. I reminded her of the promotion review the previous spring, when she had described my leadership style as inflexible. That comment had remained in my file and nearly cost me a raise. Maren lowered her eyes and admitted that one was true. She had said it, and she had known it would hurt me. Her honesty landed harder than denial. She explained that her younger brother, Callum, had been injured in a construction accident caused by a supervisor who refused to revise a flawed plan. Maren had watched her family struggle through surgeries, debt, and years of rehabilitation. Whenever I defended a design too aggressively, she saw that supervisor. She knew it was unfair, but fear had shaped her judgment. She had attacked my character instead of questioning my decisions. Her voice broke as she said she had regretted it ever since. The fire snapped between us while daylight faded behind thick clouds but never disappeared completely. I thought of every meeting where I had dismissed her concerns before hearing them. I remembered joking to coworkers that Maren would sell her own family for a promotion. She had been standing near the copy room that day. I had assumed she did not hear me, but now I saw the pain cross her face as clearly as if the moment were happening again. Shame burned through me. I admitted what I had said. Maren nodded and whispered that she had heard every word. She had gone into a restroom afterward and cried because her family was the very reason she worked so hard. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving her mother with medical bills and a failing grocery store. Maren had spent most of her adult life believing that if she slowed down, everyone she loved would lose something. Another loud crack sounded from the eastern side of the lodge. We rushed into the corridor and discovered that snow pressure had shattered a window in one of the guest rooms. I grabbed plywood while Maren found nails and a hammer. Cold air poured through the opening, whipping snow across the floor. As I held the board in place, part of the frame collapsed, striking my shoulder and knocking me down. Pain shot through my arm. Maren dropped beside me, her controlled expression disappearing. She checked my breathing, examined my shoulder, and used a scarf to support my arm. Her voice remained steady, but tears collected along her lashes. She refused to leave me on the floor even when I insisted I could stand alone. She helped me back to the library, added wood to the fire, and searched the emergency supplies for pain medication. Every movement revealed a tenderness I had never imagined she possessed. As I sat against the stone hearth, Maren knelt beside me and said there was something else she had wanted to tell me for a long time. Her words came in a whisper, nearly lost beneath the wind. She confessed that she had not fought so fiercely because she wanted to defeat me. She fought because my opinion mattered more than anyone else's. From her first month at the firm, she had admired the way I stayed late to help junior designers, defended contractors when executives blamed them unfairly, and visited damaged buildings personally instead of judging them from photographs. She had wanted my respect, but every disagreement made her feel more invisible. Admiration had hardened into competition, and competition had become the only language we shared. She told me she had tried several times to speak honestly, but each new argument convinced her I would laugh or use her vulnerability against her. Then she looked directly into my eyes and whispered that she had cared about me long before either of us learned how to be kind to the other. I could not answer immediately. The revelation did not feel romantic at first, it felt heartbreaking. We had wasted years hiding behind pride, punishing each other for wounds neither of us had caused. I told Maren that my anger had also concealed something I did not understand. I had noticed when she changed her hair, remembered how she took her coffee, and felt an unreasonable emptiness whenever she traveled for a project. I had called it rivalry because rivalry felt safer than longing. Caring for someone who challenged me meant risking rejection, and I had spent most of my life avoiding any situation I could not control. My father had been emotionally distant, praising achievement but treating vulnerability like weakness. I had learned to protect myself by judging others first. Maren's ambition frightened me because it exposed how desperately I needed approval too. That we did not suddenly become different people. There was no magical apology that erased 3 years of damage. Instead, we talked honestly for hours as daylight slowly brightened and dimmed behind the storm. We spoke about the careers we wanted, the families we feared disappointing, and the mistakes we had hidden beneath professional success. Maren apologized without excuses for damaging my review. I apologized for humiliating her in front of our coworkers and assuming the worst whenever facts were missing. We agreed that forgiveness would require more than words. It would require changed behavior when no one was watching. For the first time, we stopped trying to win. Late afternoon, the emergency radio crackled with news that a rescue team was approaching the resort from the Western Trail. The main road remained blocked, but snowmobiles had reached the caretaker's cabin and were moving toward us. Relief should have been the strongest emotion in the room. Instead, I felt an unexpected sadness that once we returned to the office, fear and routine might rebuild the walls between us. Maren seemed to sense the same thing. She asked whether everything we had said would disappear when the doors reopened. I told her it would disappear only if we allowed embarrassment to become stronger than honesty again. I promised that when we returned, would correct the false stories I had helped spread about her. She promised to tell management the truth about my past contributions and withdraw her name from consideration for the promotion until the review process could be conducted fairly. The rescue team arrived while the sky was still pale with winter daylight. As they led us through the snow toward waiting vehicles, Maren stayed beside me, steadying my injured arm. The lodge behind us looked nearly swallowed by the mountain, its roof bowed beneath the weight of the storm. I realized our rivalry had been the same kind of burden, layer after layer of misunderstanding, pride, and unspoken pain until something inside us nearly collapsed. We had survived because the pressure finally forced us to stop pretending. Back in Boston, the truth created consequences neither of us expected. The director who had repeatedly manipulated project credit was investigated and later removed from management. Our promotion competition was postponed while the company revised its review process. Maren publicly acknowledged my work on the courthouse restoration, and I admitted during a team meeting that I had misjudged her and contributed to a hostile environment. Some coworkers were shocked. Others quietly told us they had seen the tension and wished we had spoken sooner. Neither of us became senior project director that month. Strangely, it no longer felt like a loss. Instead, we were assigned to lead the mountain resort restoration together. We accepted under one condition: decisions would be documented, credit would be shared, and disagreement would never again become humiliation. Working together was not always easy. We still argued about materials, budgets, and preservation methods. But now we asked questions before making accusations. We learned that respect did not require agreement and that strength did not require emotional distance. Over time, our partnership became the most successful collaboration in the firm. Nearly a year after the storm, we returned to the restored lodge on a bright winter morning for its reopening ceremony. Sunlight poured through new windows, reflecting across the snow-covered hills. The damaged library had become a community room, but the original stone fireplace remained. Maren stood beside it, smiling with a softness I had once believed she did not possess. I took her hand in front of the same hearth where we had finally told the truth. There was no competition in that moment, no audience to impress, and no victory to claim. There were simply two imperfect people choosing honesty after years of fear. Before this story ends, leave a meaningful comment about someone you may have misunderstood, or about a moment when forgiveness changed the way you saw another person. Sometimes healing begins with the courage to admit that the story we believed was incomplete. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Maren and I never forgot the day the mountain trapped us together. People often assumed the storm was the disaster we survived, but they were wrong. The real disaster had been the years we spent standing close enough to see each other, yet refusing to look beyond our pride. The snow did not create our connection. It simply silenced the noise long enough for us to hear the truth. And in the warmth of a broken lodge, with daylight struggling through frozen windows, the woman I had called my greatest rival became the person who taught me that sometimes love does not begin when two people finally agree. Sometimes it begins when they stop fighting to be right and become brave enough to understand.